All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. Let me first say, when I was in high school back in the 90s and thinking about becoming a journalist, particularly a music journalist, my guest is somebody I always wanted to interview back then. So this is a great pleasure for me. I'm just thrilled to welcome Tracy Bonham. Tracy, thank you for being here.
Hi, Joel. Good to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this one.
Took
Um,
us a while.
And there's a lot that we can be getting into here, and we certainly will. Um, I wanted to let the viewer know there is new music
Mhm.
that you've been releasing over the past couple of months. Um, but there's also been some other issues as well that you've been very much to your credit forthcoming in discussing.
Mhm.
For the viewer who doesn't know, Tracy, you were diagnosed with breast cancer earlier this year. And that diagnosis followed a divorce that happened in recent years. And of course, we had this pandemic in recent years
Oh
as
yeah.
well. So there's been a lot happening. So first and foremost, I just wanted to ask, how are you? How are things going with you? And where are you at the moment with things?
Thank you for asking. Yeah. I'm actually in such a better place. So I'm happy to report, that I've grown a lot. This cancer diagnosis was, you know, it was surprising. I've been healthy my entire life. But it also had its blessings. So I've used this time to really, you know, look at what's important in life and everything from little things from just getting more rest and taking care of my body, but drawing boundaries and being more direct with people, daily meditation practice. It's been really a blessing. And I'll also say that it was caught early. So it's not a dire situation. It's still scary. And, you have to really, it's a wake up call,
Yeah.
but I'm doing much better. And yes, you're right. The pandemic was its own thing for everyone. And going through a divorce during the pandemic was probably the hardest part of it all.
Yeah. My divorce happened right before the pandemic. So
Oh, good. That's good
yeah.
for you. Smart thinking.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, now I'm all alone and isolated, kind of like how it's been, but
Well, I know, I'm sure, right. There's always, good silver linings and difficult parts about it. Quarantining with someone you're trying to divorce is really hard.
well, I'm
Uh,
I'm very pleased to hear that things currently are in a much more positive place for you. And some of that positive news certainly is the fact that there is new material, as I mentioned. First and foremost, most recently, you issued a new version of Whether You Fall, which is a song that already has a bit of history. It came out initially in 2005,
right.
was part of the L Word. And the new version, as much as I love the original track, I'm really taken by what you've done in the current context with this number. What led you to give this particular song a new life?
Mm. That song has always been a fan favorite. So partially it's for my fans, but also, the message over the most recent years, the message for me, it was kind of like a gift for myself. I really needed to, listen to my own lyrics and um, allow that message to inspire me as well as the people, that I'm performing it for or sharing it with. And I recently started playing, or in the last few years, started playing with a new wonderful group of musicians. And when we played that song, it just started to morph into this power rock ballad. I don't know what else to call it. It's hard to classify my music, but it was so incredibly powerful to play it in front of audiences. And I'd get feedback that was just people were blown away. And some older fans would come up and say, just the history for them, that song helps them get through really hard times in their life, which always meant a lot to me. I love hearing that. And I love knowing that. So it just seemed like an obvious thing to put this on the album. And we were recording the album before I had the cancer diagnosis. This was just going to be, you know, a song about all the other hard things I was going through. So once it became, known to me that I also had cancer, and then the song and the recording was already so beautiful, it seemed like an obvious decision to make it a single.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a beautiful rendition.
Yeah.
So viewers who have not heard it yet, track it down. I will put links in the video description to check this out. Um, I also wanted to talk about your preceding single released earlier this year. And I have to fully admit, I've done this a long time with musicians. I rarely get nervous or emotional, but I'm a bit of both going into this next topic.
Okay.
Um, because you released a song in March called Damn the Sky for Being Too Wide. Um, what a song.
Right.
What a song. Uh,
Mhm.
I live for songs like that, and
Wow.
I'm kept alive because of songs like that.
Wow. Okay.
So
All
thank
right.
you for that.
Yeah, you're
Um,
welcome.
especially in light of your current circumstances, hearing that song. Um, sorry.
No, it's, you know what? It's really okay, because feelings and, emotions are actually good. Nobody should be ashamed. I love it. I'm sorry. I don't mean to say I love that you're crying, but I really am more drawn to people who don't hide their feelings.
Well, I've looked to artists who tell the truth,
Yeah.
and I find that incredibly rare these days. So to
Right.
hear a song like that, I really appreciate. Um, yeah. So to walk that into a question, um, when was that song written? Was it post-diagnosis, or was it just a kind of strange coincidence that this was developing as that was going on?
Another interesting coincidence. And when I look back at the day, I remember the day I wrote the song. It was in 2019, actually.
Mm,
So it was pre-pandemic. I was unhappy in my marriage, so the divorce proceedings hadn't started, but I was really lonely. And I remember, feeling already completely isolated. And it's kind of the worst thing, right? When you're lonely in a relationship or in a marriage. And, we are parents of a beautiful child, but also challenges, with any parent. There's challenges in parenting. But we were having a particularly hard time for a while in his adolescence. And I guess me and my ex, we want the best for our child, and we have all the best intentions, but we couldn't connect. And so, when you have a hard day, what I want to do is sit down maybe with a glass of wine and go, what was that? And have a moment of like, let's commiserate and let's, help each other. What could we have both done differently? I didn't have any of that. I just felt like I had judgment and criticism. And so that was, the breakdown of our relationship kind of was about that. It was I didn't feel like I had a support system. Also, my parents are on the other coast. We're a little older, so we don't have, there's not a lot of like family support around. We're all over the country. We've got people in, California and Oregon. And so, yeah, we didn't have a lot of people just to call at the drop of a hat. So that song, I felt it coming. I almost don't want to take credit for the song because it came to me in one sitting,
mm.
which is something that never really happens to me. And I knew it was coming. So I hit voice record, put it on the piano, started. playing and lyrics and all just came out. And that's one of the reasons why the form is not your typical pop song. Like the chorus doesn't come until much later.
Yeah.
Um, and I loved that about it when I listened back. And because the moment was so profound, I decided to not change it at all. Hmm.
I am curious because you are a mother, and the song says a lot, and
Mhm.
it says a lot about things that aren't particularly comfortable to
Mhm.
talk about. I mean, these are intense feelings you're channeling in that particular piece of work. What kind of response did you get, from your child and your family, hearing not only the song, but knowing now, certainly some of the circumstances that went into it?
Mhm. Wow, you're the first person to ask that, because I've played it for fans. I've played it for, at performances. But the strange thing, and maybe it's not so strange because of the estrangement from my ex, is that I don't know if he's heard it. So
Mm.
maybe he has at this point. And, I have spoken about it in interviews saying, there's really nothing scathing to say. It's not an angry song, but it is a song where I will say I didn't feel supported. But unfortunately, I haven't really worked that out yet. And I don't even know if my son's heard it.
Mm.
But I have gotten a lot of feedback from friends and family, and also when I perform it. And the general feeling is like whoever's in the room, when I start to say, "Where's my village?" I feel a lot of the outpouring of love and community there.
Yeah, that's certainly the lyric.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and from what I understand, you are working on a full-length album, which will carry the same title as the
Yeah.
song. How indicative is that particular song of the overall mood and what we can expect from the full album when it's released?
It's actually pretty indicative. There's another song called The Uncertain Sun, brand new song that I'm really proud of. It's a little it has a different mood. It's a little lighter. But and it has a Beatlesque, and there's one moment that feels really Beach Boysy. Um, but the lyrics have a similar thing. You have to dig a little deeper because the lyrics, if you don't dig deep, you might think, oh, this is just a really happy song. But it's another song that I realized was for me. When I wrote the song and the message, I thought it was for someone else. And then I realized, whoa, look in the mirror. This is a song that's really possibly written from a deeper place inside me that's trying to tell me something. And I had a hard time. Uh, we froze. Are we okay? Can you see me and everything? Uh-oh.
I think we're good.
Oh, okay. Okay, good. That, during the divorce and COVID and isolation and quarantine, you know, as we all went through, it was really, really hard. And there were moments, not to get too dark, but I questioned my place on this earth, which is really weird to say because I've always been a very happy person. But it was hard. It was so hard. And one of the lyrics is, I don't want to say goodnight to the horizon beyond your eyes. When I look into your smile, I get one more chance to make things right. And I realized after I had been performing that song that those lyrics were for me as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, look forward to hearing the final album. Where are you as far as completing that and putting it out
Mhm.
there?
Well, yeah, so we have been, releasing little breadcrumbs as singles, but it's going to be actually finished later in July. Like all the
Oh,
songs mixed and mastered, and then we'll do packaging. Probably should start that now. And looking for a fall release.
Oh, great. Great,
Yeah,
great. So not too far off.
not too
Excellent.
far off. I'm like, ooh, to-do lists are starting to go in my head.
I wanted, and I promise I'm not going to keep it in a dark alley the entire time. Um,
Right.
but it was interesting because well before I heard about the current single and received the update on where things had been with you in recent times, I kind of fell into a YouTube rabbit hole one night. And for whatever reason, I wanted to revisit the 90s. So I was going through all the old VMA videos on
Oh
YouTube.
yeah.
And
Uh-huh.
you do show up, some of the clips. And I remember back in those days, as I mentioned at the start of the video, the 90s was when I chose my career path. This is what I wanted to do. And, being young and kind of naive, I thought, look at all these people, they're loaded and they're stars and they're selling tons of records and making tons of money. Then I got involved in the industry, right? And realized that's not the case most of the time.
Right.
And I know from what I've heard about your history, it wasn't the case with you in a lot of ways.
Right.
You had a very successful album in 96, the Upright album. Um, have you ever recouped?
Oh my God, no, no. I mean, I stopped getting the paper statements, but it stayed, I'll tell you, unrecouped at 1,000,007 for the longest time. I mean, it probably still is 1,000,007. So it's like, one of the beautiful things, I guess, is that I don't actually physically have to pay them back, but I won't start to see any kind of money from my career until that is paid back. And
Right,
it's not dollar per dollar, it's a percentage of a dollar. So,
right, right.
yeah.
Mm. That is the reality for a lot of people. As I've done this over the years, I've gotten to know a lot of artists, some quite well from that era,
Mhm.
who had a similar experience. Thankfully, some of them mentally kind of got through it.
Yeah. Right.
Others didn't. We lost some people
Yeah.
who fell into that situation. But thankfully, you're still here and you're still creating music. Um, so because I know so many people who have had that experience, how were you able to rise above that and maintain your mental health and your sense of self and your ability to continue to be an artist when you're faced with that situation where the world thinks
Mhm.
success has come to your world and the reality is, every dinner you had, every limo ride you took, well, someone paid for that and it's you,
Yeah.
you know.
Really true. It's funny that you're bringing this up right now because just yesterday in the van, as me and my trio were driving to play Summerfest in Milwaukee, that was the conversation we were having. It just came up, and I was talking about, yeah, all the helicopter ride that Leor Cohen, the head of Def Jam, took me on to go see Woodstock '99, and then he had to get me a car service from where we had to fly back to his home in the Hamptons, which is like 2 hours away from Brooklyn. And he got me a car service, and it must have cost like $300. And at the time, I didn't realize, but it's no doubt he put that on, my tab.
Right,
And all of the dinners that they, tried to wine and dine me to write another hit, or the visits, from the president of the label when I'm playing a little dump in Kansas City, and this person is staying in the suite at the Four Seasons. That was paid for by me, but you are not told that.
right.
And I was naive, of course, and I figured that out later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, it didn't take you out, you know.
Right, right. Well, it could have, yeah, to further your answer your question. There was a moment, I remember it. I was reading a New York Times Magazine article where it was an interview of Amy Mann.
Mm,
And, I like Amy Mann, but in this particular time, I mean, this was probably 1999 or something, 2000. And she sounded really bitter. and she was complaining about the music business, and I had been doing that, and I even wrote my whole second album is basically one hate letter. uh, I read that and I thought, whoa, I don't want to be bitter. I don't, because look at me. I mean, I'm not doing badly, you know, I'm still able to make music. A lot of other people would kill to be in my position. I still had a record deal at that time. So I turned a corner. I decided I wasn't going to bitch anymore about my position, and I was going to just make make better art. And my perspective started to change too, because then things started to happen. September 11th happened, and I thought, I my music, I need to put a more positive message into the world. It felt like that was my mission.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, Going back to the present tense, I know you are performing, you have shows coming up, which I'll put in the video description as well, so people in those areas can check it out. Um, and it's important to know too, you've pretty consistently released albums since the 90s. You have a sizable body of work at this point. Um, Touring these days, what level of difficulty, if any, do you have in selecting a set list to take out with you?
Oh yeah. Um, well, I think the challenge for me is to raise awareness that I've grown, I've evolved as an artist, and I'm not, you know, necessarily the angry 90s chick. I've really evolved. I do still play the songs from that era, but they're gonna sound a little different. I mean, some of them sound a lot different, but they're the same song. And what I love is that they stand the test of time.
Mm,
But the challenge is for promoters to get that message, for the media to get that message, and I have to constantly, um, you know, sh- uh, I have to show the world that this is who I am now. And I also have to really work on my ego. Like yesterday, when I was performing at Summerfest in Milwaukee, I had, moments on stage where we were playing, Whether You Fall, which starts off very quietly, and you can hear the other bands and the other stages in this rockin' festival. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm losing them, or this is not what they expected of me. And the chatter was going, and I just went, okay, Tracy, wait a minute. This is you now.
mm.
And you don't have to, the people pleaser in me needs to just step aside. And I am giving them something interesting. I'm not going to give them the same thing they expect. And I think, as any artist probably could attest, like, that's a challenge, but it's kind of maybe our job.
Right,
Yeah.
right. For the viewer who may be catching up with you, via this video, there are a couple of it. Well, there's a lot of interesting points in your post 90s career, but there are a couple I wanted to bring up just because I think they're so cool. The first one being you recorded with Aerosmith,
Yeah.
Honking on Bobo,
Yeah.
which is one of my favorite Aerosmith albums,
Oh,
actually.
great.
So,
Yeah, that's a good
um,
one.
how did that connection come about?
Oh, that's a cool story. So I was performing this little tiny club underneath a restaurant in I guess it was in the West Village in New York City. And I had become friends with Jack Douglas, the producer,
Yeah.
and he came to that little tiny show. And he came backstage, and he said, he loved my voice and my performance, and he loved the soulful, he heard that, I had kind of a soulful bluesy sound. Sometimes it comes out, a lot of my influences come from that. And he said, this is going to sound bizarre, but I'm making a record with Aerosmith. And I had kind of known Aerosmith from before too. They asked me to open for their big opening of Mamakin,
Mm,
their club on Lansdowne Street. So we'd been in contact and stuff, and I knew Stephen pretty well. But Jack Douglas was like, "I want you to come, for a couple days out at wherever it was. I can't remember, somewhere out Situate, Massachusetts, or wherever Steven Tyler lived at the time, and record an album. It's going to be in 2 days. We're just going to like bang it out." And I was like, "Okay, let's do this." And so they got me to come out. The entire time was amazing. Being around them was great. They're just a bunch of goofballs. And then we all got in the same room. And for the two songs I was on, Backpack Train and Jesus is on the Main Line, we were just in one room. And Jack Douglas and everyone was just so gracious and generous. And they were like, "Tracy, you take the solo, sing, and so it wasn't as if I was completely a background singer. It was like I was featured, and I was really honored. And I listen to those sometimes and I'm like psyched the way it sounds. Sounds very real,
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's
right?
one of the things I love about that entire album, that they went
Yeah,
back to that vibe.
right. It wasn't polished.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It was exactly what you described. It sounded like a band in a room. You know,
yeah.
that's kind of how I like my rock and roll. So it's definitely a great record.
Mm.
I also wanted to ask you about your collaboration with Blue Man Group, which is another one that's kind of wow, you didn't see that one coming when Mother came out. So the Blue Man Group I've seen live. I don't believe I saw them with you. But I do know that you were early 2000s involved with them for a bit as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that was really fun. And it completely left field, right? And it was the same. Strangely, it was the same little club. How weird is that? And I'm probably conflating everything, but maybe it was the same night. It was a magical evening where it was probably a different night. That would have been too weird. Where the three original Blue Men came to my show. They came backstage, and it was a very similar scene where it was like, "Hey, you're amazing. We love you. We're fans of yours." And I'd also done some recording with them before for the complex. So when they came backstage, they were like, "Do you want to go on tour with us? We're starting to put together this big, huge like arena rock tour." And I was like, "Yes." So went out with them, and I mean that was incredible. Those guys were so completely generous. Not only had me featured as a solo, like a part of their show, performer, featured guest, but uh, I had asked if I guess I had asked if I would also open the show so that I could still be Tracy Bonham. I was a little nervous about being enveloped by Blue Man Group
Mm.
because they're very, there's
Right.
right, they have their world. I mean, and that's what kind of makes them so fascinating, is otherworldly, and you can easily get enveloped in there and lose your identity. So I just wanted to make sure that I could still maintain some autonomy, and they let me open for these big huge hockey arenas, and it was a really beautiful experience.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. I mean, well, you know better than I do, but they're a whole thing.
Their
So
whole thing, yeah, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating, and
yeah.
they're just fun. They're so great. All of them, they're so wonderful.
Excellent. As we wrap up, we hit on some things about the industry that aren't so great. Not a real big secret for people who've done it, but and in many ways, the industry that created that scene doesn't really exist anymore. Um,
Mm,
I, I don't know if you'd agree with that. It's particularly in terms of technology, let's say.
mm,
Things are a lot different. The days of going to the mall to a Sam Goody and buying your first album, that's kind of changed. Um, you don't have major labels spending the artist's money, $500,000 of the artist's money to make a video and things like this. Um, so it has changed in some ways, but you're still active in 2024. What do you see as some of the advantages to where
mm.
things are now that really help not only an artist like yourself who's been on both sides of that equation, but somebody who's starting up now who wants to do this as a career, perhaps.
Right. Okay. Well, I mean, some of the really wonderful things now is that you can be a true artist. And for me personally, I don't have someone breathing down my neck to fit into a box. And it's liberating. And so I think younger artists really have more, you know, they have a liberty and freedom to create the art that they want. Um, Part of the challenge is though, and it's always will be, is that you need funding and you need, you need backing. And before it was, the record labels were banks and they could, loan you the money and pay for your part of your tour support and all of the promotion and stuff like that. Now it's up to the artist if they're not signed to a label. And there are labels out there, but the deals are completely different. And it's, in some ways it's great because it's not overinflated. Like there's not just money being thrown everywhere, which I think was unhealthy now in retrospect. But it also leaves a lot up to the artist. And I think being young is, it's definitely for the young these days who have all the time, more time, where they don't have families and kids, but also the technology, the know-how, and just the gumption, the real kind of blind ambition. You got to have that for sure. So it's a mishmash. It's like there's some really great things about it, and I love hearing new bands who reflect that, who sound completely unique and they're not derivative, and you don't hear the machine, behind it trying to make a buck. And like you said, artists that are more truthful, I see those artists and I, want to support them. And it looks like they don't rely on someone, telling them to fit into a box.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. Great way to put it. And as far as your work in the here and now, as I said, I'm really moved by what I've been hearing so far. And I know you went through hell to get there, but I really feel you've arrived at a very meaningful place artistically. And I thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. That's very nice. I appreciate that. And I feel that.
And I look forward to the album. I'm going to try to catch at least one of the upcoming shows. And perhaps our paths will cross again. But until that time, Tracy, you've been able to check something off my bucket list by having this conversation with me. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Joel. This has been really nice. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I hopefully will see you live soon.
I hope so too.